Hey there, I'm Todor from ROIABLE, and today we'll cover the SAP IdM migration topic related to Cloud Identity Services. You can find that topic under number 67 within the extensibility category right here, and clicking on it will take us to the dedicated slide. SAP Cloud Identity Services is a collective term for four fundamental business technology platform services. Those are identity authentication, identity provisioning, identity directory, and authorization management. In order to get a better idea, I can share with you a diagram which is taken from helpsap.com, which displays how these services interact in the security context. Starting with identity authentication, which is probably the service you all have heard about, it has a central role in anything related to authentication within the SAP Business Technology Platform and the adjacent SAP Cloud applications. It is actually more than just an authentication service, although the name suggests only that. It can also facilitate single sign-on not only to the cloud but also to on-premise applications, and since last year it can even be used to achieve SSO for the SAP GUI client. SAP themselves are heavily relying on this service for their SAP ID service authentication. This alone should indicate as to how strategic this service is. SAP IIS does not only operate standalone, but it can also easily adapt to various hybrid modes, where authentication is forwarded to another corporate identity provider of choice. On top of the delegated authentication, it can offer various security perks like two-factor and risk-based authentication, custom login overlays, reCAPTCHA validation, social login, and much more. Next comes the identity provisioning service, which holds the keys to your SAP landscape neatly bundled in various connectors as source, target, and proxy scenarios. Thanks to the large bundle of connectors and the straightforward configuration, each system is only a few clicks from being integrated. Sources are clearly systems from which IPS reads users and groups and pushes them to a selected target which is configured to consume the data from the source. Both source and target facilitate transformation, which defines the mapping between the attributes. The proxy scenario is very popular with IAM solutions since it can be used both as source and target at the same time to deliver expected results of reading, writing users, groups, and assignments. We will skip the authorization management in this overview since it's not such a critical service in the context of IAM, but we will use the next minutes to delve a bit into the identity directory service, which is probably the one you have heard the least of. This is because it's a kind of invisible service. It is the backbone and data storage for all information you store within IIS, often also seen as central point of truth for users and their assignments in the SAP space. There is a well-developed public Scheme 2.0 API, which also reads and writes, which also allows reads and write operations to the identity directory. Actually, if you define an IIS connection within IPS and you use the latest version of the API provided, you'll be accessing the identity directory underneath. Another way to access identity directory information is simply by browsing the user management of IIS. All data you see there comes from schemas defined in the identity directory. Furthermore, custom schemas are supported to give further flexibility in defining custom attributes. Each identity stored in the identity directory gets a very important attribute automatically, and this would be the so-called GUID, which is the key attribute for all SAP services in the cloud. Not so long ago, it was also added as an additional attribute to all ABAP systems to facilitate easier user mapping between on-premise and cloud. From everything mentioned so far, it is become clear that no matter which IAM platform you pick for your successor of SAP IdM, it should have very good integration to all these services. This is also depicted on the recently released Cloud Lead Identity Lifecycle Reference Architecture. The diagram you see shows some example SAP source systems like SuccessFactors and Fieldglass, which are consumed by an IAM solution and in tight collaboration with SAP Cloud Identity Services facilitate the identity lifecycle. But you might say, Is that all that I need to do to replace my SAP IDM? Basically, just connect my new IAM to SAP Cloud Identity Services. Well, as always here, the answer is not so straightforward and can be summarized in three different answers. A definitive yes, if you already have connected SAP IDM to SAP IPS and have source, target, and proxy connections working properly for your scenarios. Then logically, disconnecting SAP IDM, you should connect your new IAM and adapt the processes there to behave more or less similar to get the same result. Then comes a tentative yes. If you have some connections between SAP IDM and SAP IPS, but you are having trouble connecting other SAP products and services due to some limitations within the standard IPS connectors or some other issues. And finally, it would be a no if you haven't even started establishing your SAP IPS provisioning. You would need to take care of that first or in parallel to your actual new IAM implementation so that you can take advantage of the architecture shown here. No matter in which of the above answers you find yourself right now, one of the first things to do for your new IAM is to assure proper sync to the Identity Directory service, which will be the starting point for all other scenarios. To summarize, SAP Cloud Identity Services are your to-go solution when targeting SAP landscapes in like 80 to 90% of the cases. For the other 10 to 20, you have to find alternatives based on the capabilities of your IAM. And one more important note. As of the release of this video, the generic scheme connector of SAP IPS is not included by default in the standard. It is added only if you have purchased the Identity Access Governance service alongside. This session became a bit longer than usual, but I hope it clarified for you some important topics around the SAP Cloud Identity Services. Don't forget to check on our social media channels for the full release of the ROIABLE SAP IdM migration guidelines. Till then, retain investment, stay compliant, and embrace the cloud. See you next time.